They say the drums were beaten to drown the screams, that a bronze god waited with outstretched arms, his belly filled with fire, and into that fire they cast their children. This is Pantheon Mythology, and today we explore the question, why is Moloch so terrifying? If you love mythology, check out our limited edition desk mats created in partnership with our friends at Epic Desk, available until the 3rd of August. Also, Pantheon Apparel, our clothing brand inspired by myths, legends and folklore. We ship worldwide and are rated excellent on Trustpilot. Links to both in the description. Moloch has no mythology, origin story, temple ruins bearing his name. He doesn't appear on the gods of the Canaan or the lips of the priests or in the dedications of kings. Yet here he is, emerging in the margins as a warning, a curse, a horror. That absence is its own kind of presence. Where most gods came with stories to explain them, Moloch arrived with silence, fire, and fear. Some scholars argue he was never a deity at all, that the word we know as Moloch may have once referred to a rite, a type of offering, rather than a god. In the original Hebrew texts, the letters MLK appear without vowels, and in the ancient Semitic languages, that combination could mean king, melech, or an offering of dedication, molk. Without vowels, there's no way to be certain. Centuries later, Jewish scribes known as the Masoretes added vowel markings to preserve pronunciation. But with MLK, they made a choice. They vocalized it as Molech, a sound that closely resembles the Hebrew word borshet, meaning shame. This was a condemnation encoded into every structure of the word. What may have once been a dry ritual term was transformed into a name that evoked disgrace, judgment and terror. A ritual became a god became a warning. Others argue that Moloch was real, or at least believed to be. He may have been another face of Milcom, the national god of the Ammonites, who is condemned in many of the same biblical passages, or perhaps he was linked to Malik, the Phoenician term for ruler or one that receives offerings. In this reading, Moloch wasn't a separate god at all, but a label the biblical authors used to brand the most horrifying practices of their neighbors with a single name, one that blurred the lines between deity, devotion, and death. Nowhere is that horror more vividly described than in the valley of Hinnom, just outside ancient Jerusalem. There it says children were passed through the fire to Moloch. What that phrase means has been debated, with some suggesting it referred to symbolic rites of dedication or purification by flame. But the prevailing scholarly view is grimly literal. It was sacrifice, ritualized, repeated, accepted. And though no furnace-shaped idols have been found in the Israelite territory, we do have something else. Rows of small urns buried in the earth of Carthage in what modern scholars call the Tophets. Inside them, the cremated remains of infants and small animals. These could be the results of mass child sacrifice dedicated to gods like Baal Hamon and Tanit. Or perhaps they were simply burial sites for stillbirths and young children honoured with offerings. But the scale, the burn patterns, and the inscriptions have left the debate unsettled. Whatever the truth, the association between fire, sacrifice, and the divine was not unique to one place. To offer a child to Moloch was an ultimate sin, a rupture, something that tore at the fabric of Israel's identity. In a world of many gods, where sacrifice was currency and power demanded blood, Yahweh stood apart. The covenant between Yahweh and his people was built on obedience, justice, and life. Moloch was the inverse of that. He didn't ask for righteousness. He asked for children. The Hebrew Bible treats Moloch as an abomination. In Leviticus 18:12, the command is clear: do not give your children to be sacrificed to Moloch. In Leviticus 20, the language sharpens. Anyone who does so is to be executed. The community is to turn against them. Even those who look the other way will share the guilt. There is no tolerance, no loophole, no mercy. The book of 2 Kings 23:10 references a place called Tophet in the valley of Hinnom, where the people built high places to burn their children. King Josiah, in a rare moment of mortal clarity, defiles the site and shuts it down. But it wouldn't stay silent for long. In Jeremiah 7:31, the prophet speaks with fury. They have built the high places of Tophet to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, something I did not command, nor did it enter my mind. In a line that says everything, not only was this practice forbidden, it was unthinkable, outside the bounds of the covenant, beyond the imagination of a God who gave laws carved in stone. But the line repeated throughout these passages, to pass through the fire, has long stirred debate. Some ancient and medieval commentators suggest that it was symbolic, that a child was carried between flames as a rite of dedication, not consumed. A dark ritual, but not a fatal one. Yet the broader context doesn't support this. The intensity of the condemnations, the physical association with fire, the burial sites, the stoning of offenders all point to something literal. The child didn't simply pass through. They didn't come back. Why would any culture do this? Why offer children to the flames? The reasons weren't always cruelty. They were famine, war, drought, desperation. In the grip of disaster, sacrifice could be rationalized as necessity. A people under siege might give what they could not bear to lose, believing it could save what little remained. When survival feels uncertain, the line between devotion and coercion collapses. This is the psychology of sacrifice, where hope curdles into horror. And it isn't ancient. These are the same justifications that persist in new forms, trading mental health for productivity, privacy for convenience, nature for profit, and sometimes the future of children for short-term gain. Different flames, same logic. To sacrifice a child to Moloch was to break a world view. The covenant with Yahweh was built on life, on the protection of the innocent, the orphan, the vulnerable. Moloch turned that upside down. He demanded what should have been untouchable. He turned children into fuel. And so, Moloch was weaponized in Scripture, a symbol of everything Israel vowed never to become. Where Yahweh was justice, Moloch was horror. Where Yahweh offered covenant, Moloch offered ash. Moloch's story doesn't end in the fire pits of Tophet. It mutates. As the ancient world shifted, as monotheism solidified and the gods of rival nations faded, Moloch was reclassified, cast out from the realm of the gods. He re-emerged as a demon. In early Jewish apocalyptic literature, particularly texts like the Pseudepigrapha, Moloch becomes one of the infernal ones, a dark presence aligned to the underworld. These writings, composed centuries after the exile, sought to categorize evil with sharper lines. The deities of other peoples were devils, and Moloch, already associated with the most abominable rites imaginable, became a natural candidate for damnation. The transformation deepens in Christian cosmology. As hell developed its own hierarchy, so too did its pantheon of horrors. Moloch became more than a warning, he became a personality, a commander of torment, a spirit of devastation. In demonological texts and grimoires, he is classified among the princes of hell, sometimes associated with saturnine influence, rigid, cruel, cold. His power was force, compulsion, sacrifice by command. But it was in literature that Moloch gained his most enduring infernal crown. In Paradise Lost, John Milton resurrects him in full horror. Among the rebel angels in Pandemonium, Moloch is the one who rises first. He is described as horrid king, besmeared with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears, the god who preferred hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. While Satan and others debate strategy, guile, infiltration, corruption, Moloch demands war. Not only conflict, but total annihilation. A second rebellion, a direct assault on heaven, even if it ends in obliteration. Milton's Moloch is more than a demon. He's a philosophy, the embodiment of violent purity, no compromise, no nuance, no delay, just action. His voice booms in the halls of hell, urging flames for the sake of fire itself. This reframing stuck. Over the centuries, Moloch came to symbolize war at its most brutal and mechanized. Sacrifice no longer meant fire at the altar, it meant bodies in the trenches, cities razed, children taken by bombs instead of priests. Political theorists began to invoke his name to describe systems that devour the innocent in service of abstract power. In the machine of empire, in the churn of industry, Moloch was reborn. In 1955, poet Allen Ginsberg unleashed Howl, a furious indictment of modern society, and with it gave Moloch a new phase. Moloch whose mind is pure machinery, he wrote. Moloch whose blood is running money. In Ginsberg's version, Moloch wasn't a god of flame and altar, but the machinery of American industry, militarism, and greed. He was the skyscraper that blocked out the sky, the system that turned souls into statistics, the engine that consumed everything human in pursuit of profit. Decades later, psychiatrist and writer Scott Alexander sharpened the metaphor in his essay Meditations on Moloch. There, Moloch became the name for runaway systems, dysfunctions where rational choices by individuals led to irrational destruction for all. He described a world where nations stockpile weapons not because they want war, because they fear being outgunned, where companies poison the earth not out of malice, but because the competition would do it faster. In this vision, Moloch is the trap we can't see until it's too late. A force that doesn't need belief, only participation. This version of Moloch no longer demands your child. He asks for your time, your silence, your complicity. He is the pressure to work more, to spend more, to fight harder, just to stay in place. He is the loop, the grind, the game. A god no longer made of bronze, but of incentives, outcomes, and invisible chains. In the secluded woods of Northern California lies Bohemian Grove, a private, heavily guarded retreat where the world's most powerful figures gather behind closed gates. Politicians, CEOs, military contractors, and financiers, cloaked in ceremonial robes, perform a ritual called the cremation of care. Before a 40-foot stone owl, they process with torches, recite incantations, and burn a human effigy in a theatrical rite meant to cast off their burdens. But the symbol runs deeper than satire. The owl they gather before, known as the Owl of Bohemia, looms with blank eyes, silent, watching, and immovable. They say it represents wisdom, but others see something older in its shape, its posture, its ritual use. They see Moloch. It doesn't matter what name is spoken. The imagery is already speaking. A great stone idol, fire at its feet, a bound figure offered into the flames, all presided over by the elite. And as they chant and burn care, the effigy of conscience itself, the message becomes unmistakable. In this circle, empathy is the enemy. Sacrifice is not horror. Sacrifice is tradition. There is no temple inscription, no priest crying out to Moloch by name, but the logic is the same. Strip away the theatre, the robes, the laughter, and what's left is the very ritual ancient texts condemned. The rejection of care, the removal of guilt, the elevation of power through fire. In a world ruled by machinery, wealth, and endless war, Moloch doesn't need faith. He needs obedience. And the powerful are still kneeling. Moloch is terrifying because he never vanished. He evolved. No longer a god with a name, but a hunger with 1,000 faces. He speaks through policy, through profit, through systems too vast to question. He asks for what is most sacred, our children, our future, and we give it freely, dressed in reason, justified as progress. His altar is everywhere now, in soil turned toxic for yield, in minds broken for output, in the silent despair we call stability. Moloch does not deceive. He never hides. He lays the bargain bare. Sacrifice what matters, and I will make you powerful. And every day, in boardrooms, classrooms, and corridors of power, we keep saying yes.